Remember that gorgeous R9 we unboxed a couple of months ago? She was a little bit crusty and dusty. Let's give her some love today. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Let's go ahead and see her all cleaned up and restored now. What a fantastic top on this R9. Now, if you don't know what an R9 is, that's just slang for 1959 reissue. R stands for reissue, and then the last number tells you what year. So, for example, an R7 would be a 1957, an RO would simply be a 1960 reissue. So you're talking things like, do you have a flame top, or is it a gold top? What kind of tailpiece do you have? Is it tune-o-matic stop bar, or is it one of the wrap tails or trapeze styles? As well as neck profiles. That's the biggest difference between all the different reissues. So typically, an R9 is that nice in-between neck profile. However, this one feels a little bit chunkier than that. We'll have to get the dimensions over on the workbench. Gibson started to do custom shop historic reissues starting in late 1993. However, for about a decade before that, they had something that they called the Les Paul reissue, but it didn't have the long neck tenon or anything like that. But anything post-2012 will have all hide glue construction. But this episode's not really meant to get too heavy, it's just to appreciate the awesome top and wood quality that they were using in the mid-2000s. This top is just awesome. I love it. And I think the color's quite nice too, but something that's not necessarily up to 2024 specs is we don't have an aniline cherry dyed back on this. It's just a nice brown color. But what's kind of cool about this is it blends a dark back gold top with an R9 because we've got that bigger neck profile too. So this is just kind of a weird freak example. So I view this as a plus, but I mean, if you're looking for the most accurate reissue, just find yourself one out of the demo shop if you're looking for a deal. But this one's from the year 2007. As far as our case, this one is currently coming with one of the Lifton reissue styles, so that's nice. And what kind of case candy do we have? Unfortunately, we're missing the most important one, the COA, but hey, at least we have the final pack checklist that's matching. Our polishing cloth, care guide, the COA is in the case. Twice they lied to us! Truss rod tool, Gibson custom vintage reissue strings, and our bumblebees and reissue hang tags. However, if you missed that unboxing episode, I bought a collection from a guy, and he said this one had special pickups installed. So let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs, and see if we really have Tim Shaw PAFs put in here. Well, our surprise in the pickup department ended up being not such a good surprise. It was a half-truth. So when he purchased this guitar from a dealer, he said, I have new old stock Tim Shaw PAFs I'll install on this guitar for you for X price. So he said, sure, let's go ahead and do it. But unfortunately, that's not a Tim Shaw. And neither is the bridge. And I might be saying, hey, Trogly, doesn't it have the patent number baseplate to it? It looks like a Shaw to me. Unfortunately, people get scammed all the time with these. So most likely these are late 80s Gibson PU 490 pickups. It's the birth of the Gibson modern day pickup, before they briefly go into the Bill Lawrence, the original humbuckers. So you can find these in 86, 87, but this is how regular Gibson pickups will look until about 1992 when the whole Gibson USA baseplate comes into play. But maybe our readings can tell us more. Uh-oh. 3.78, that's not right for a humbucker. 7.23 in the neck, okay. 248 in the middle. We might have a dead coil. Because that's another thing, the late 80s was a super experimental time when Gibson just came under new ownership. They wanted to do their own thing that set them apart. It could be some experimental humbucker. We'll have to do some more troubleshooting on that. But for now, we can take a look at our pickup cavity. We've got the long neck tenon because this is a custom shop historic reissue. You can see your maple block capping off the truss rod route. You can see leftover buffing compound, as well as the maple top joining onto our mahogany body. And the routes, they're a little bit rough, but hey, we're in the mid-2000s. Now let's check out our bridge and tailpiece. It's your typical ABR1, mounted historically, with a post in the body, but not a stud. And a lightweight aluminum tailpiece, because that's what the original 50s ones had. Let's just take a second to appreciate the top without a pick guard on. It's just such a wide 3D flame. I love this one. It's unique. That's the best way to put it. Like from far away, it just looks like a wide flame, but in person, it's got this kind of sculpt 3D look to it, and it's got the vertical wood grain on top of it. It kind of reminds me of some of the 80s Heritage Series tops, but you can see just how active this one is. That's a good one. But we do have a small ding right here on the top if you wanted to take your pickguard off and rock it as is. And our knobs do have some cracks, but remember, these are modern day replacements because when it came to me, it had some golden speed knobs on it, which just aren't correct on a reissue. And when I first got this guitar, there was like some weird gunk on the pickguard. Most of that cleaned up okay, but you can still see like where it like damaged the plastic or something when you get it in the light, and a little bit of dirt. But moving on from our two-piece flame maple top and our mahogany back that is non-weight relieved, we've got our big mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard. The mid-2000s fretboards are just awesome, and I've just recently learned this because I don't deal too much in the historics of this era. But that cool purple sparkle R7 opened my eyes to it, and then some commenters were saying they were using Madagascar rosewood at this time, and that's what it is. It looks very similar to like what I usually think of really choice Brazilian looking like. So much color, nice red streaks and some dark streaks. I'm a fan of it. Sure, we might not have the hide glue construction for everything like we do nowadays, but I would say this fretboard is way nicer than what they're using today. But I measure a 1.71 inch nut width, increasing to 2.08 by the 12, and a pretty chunky 0.93 first fret neck depth, and 1.03 at the 12th. To me, this feels more like an R8 or R7 baseball bat neck. Here's a look at that neck profile, 1st fret and 12th fret. You can see how big and rounded it is. Although it does look like there's a minor flat spot towards the back of it. Which, seeing it on the contour gauge and then trying to feel for it, yeah, you just barely feel it. The way my hand rests, I'm just against all this big shoulder right here. So that's kind of cool if you like R9s, but you always wish it had a slightly bigger neck. Now we can look onto the face of our headstock. Truss rod is the historic style wide beveled white edge. It is important to note, for whatever reason, we are missing one of the screws, but the rest, just some minor scratches, nothing too crazy. Gibson mother of pearl logo with our silk screen on the front, and historic style Glucin tuners. Now moving on to our back, there were a few surprises here as well. So down here, there appears to have been some sort of a touch-up. I'm betting somebody dropped this guitar at one point in time and had to do a drop fill. Outside of that, we do have some mild scratches in the back. They're a little tricky to see on camera, but you can just tell they're really light and faint. And this thing's not perfect condition, so I don't think it really matters at this point, but I do want you to be aware of what you're buying if you are interested in being the next owner of this one. But now our wiring. This looks correct for the mid-2000s. You get the unbranded pots with your Bumblebee capacitors. But if you look closely, can you tell me which one's not factory solder work? If you guess the top one, yep, that's your pickups on both of them. But if you look in our corner over here, you can just barely make out the R9 stamping. And the toggle switch plate, I couldn't get it off. I have this suction cup for pulling these ones off for the tough ones, but it's too big. I need to find myself a smaller one. But here we can see the thin binding in the cutaway with the maple cap exposed. But due to our brown coloring on the edges, it's not overly apparent. But we've got some strap scuffing over here by our Schaller S-Lock. The edges are fairly clean. But then our neck, I noticed something here. Do you see it? There's actually a stand rash mark right here. But thankfully, it's a dark finish. It's not overly apparent. Like, it's not going to catch your eye all the time, but when you're looking for it, yeah, we'll see that under Blacklight. There's also a couple of small dings on the neck, although I doubt they'll affect playability at all. As far as our headstock goes, we've got a couple of dings around the edges and corners, but our serial number is 971569, so it's the 1569th guitar produced by the custom shop as a 59 reissue in the year 2007. And here's a look at our vintage-style Gibson Glucin Deluxe tuners. Double line, single ringed. But now let's do our Blacklight test. Everything on the face is looking pretty good for 2007. I don't see any touch-ups here. Around the logo does appear to glow a little bit more, so it's possible something was on the headstock for an extended period of time. But yep, just as I expected. That is some sort of a touch-up down here. And then yeah, that's a pretty gnarly stand rash here. Or at least no breaks, cracks, or repairs. This one is not a bad weight at all. 8 pounds, 14.1 ounces. Just slightly under the 9, but man, this top. But let's go ahead and plug it in and see what's going on with this bridge pickup. All right, let's give this a go, starting with our neck pickup. interesting. Sounds fine. So maybe this is just like some weird pickup. The guy I got it from named a very reputable shop that said they were new old stock 80s Tim Shaws. So maybe it was some sort of other experimental pickup. I was going to be shocked if the pickup was actually dead, because this guy actually rotated through his entire collection throughout the year. Those sound good to my ears. The super humbucking pickup back in the 70s did read around 5, so maybe they were toying with something like that. Or it's possible something's wrong with one of the pots and that's why the reading was weird. I should have took it direct. But this is one of the things that modern day reissues get way better. Their pots are way more dynamic. That's pretty much an on-off switch. What did we learn today? 2000s era reissues, they're not as accurate as what they create yet today, but they're close enough for most people, and you can find some gorgeous wood. And many times, you don't have to pay quite as much if you're not worried about the kind of top that it has, and you can get a good deal on an older reissue. But the other thing you should learn from today's episode is, please verify. Trust, but verify. Just because somebody told the seller of the guitar that they did something, you need to get photos to know for sure. And if you don't know how to identify Gibson things, I do offer private help sessions on my website at troglysguitarshow.com. Now, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to make a big deal about it? No. I mean, there's still 80s Gibson pickups, but thankfully that bridge pickup ended up sounding mighty fine. So if you're interested in being the next owner of this one, you can find it for sale on my website, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next episode of the Trogly's Guitar Show. Take care.